Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my Adobe After Effects crash course. In this video, I want to take you from being an absolute beginner to knowing nothing at all about After Effects to giving you the confidence to creating your very first project. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with this video. So the first time you open up Adobe After Effects, you will be presented with this screen in front of us. And all we got to do inside of here to get started is just simply make our way over to the top left hand corner. And you can see in blue right there, we've got this new project button. Alternatively, if you've already created something before, you just go ahead and open project right there. But for most of you, this will be a new project. So we'll just go ahead and tap on that new project button. Then you will be presented with the After Effects interface. So before we go ahead and get started creating any kind of project, I just want to talk about a few of these windows and what they are used for. So this one here on the far left is our project window. And this is where you're going to import all your media files that you want to use inside of your project. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. To the right hand side of that, we have this composition window. And this is going to be our preview area to see what it is that we are creating. Then over to the right of that, we have some additional menus in here where we can find things such as your effects and presets, where you can just go ahead and drag and drop these on top of your shapes or text to animate them. And we also have some additional options in here, such as your alignment and your character settings if you want to change the font or the size. And this is all your general formatting tools you'll find in any text editor. And we also have a paragraph section, and we've got the tracker section and other things we'll talk about as the tutorial goes on. So finally, underneath all of this right here at the bottom, this is going to be our timeline. And this is where we're going to animate our project and decide at what point we want things to come in and out. And we're going to talk about this as we go on in the tutorial. This is where you're going to spend 95% of your time. But for now, let's go ahead and start creating something. So the first thing we want to do is come over to our project window, and we need to bring in some kind of files that you may want to use. There are a few different ways that we can import files into After Effects. The first one being is anywhere inside of your project window. If we just right click on our mouse, we can go down to where it says import, and we can either choose file or multiple files. Another way of doing this is just by simply heading all the way to the top to your file menu, go down to where it says import. And once again, we've got the same options with file or multiple files. Another way, and my preferred way of doing this, is just to double tap anywhere inside of your project window, and that will direct you to your hard drive. So if I just double tap in here now, it will take me to my desktop, and I can go ahead and find the file I want to work with. So it's going to be this one here, which is MJW Media Studios logo. And I'm just going to go ahead and select that. So once you found your file you want to work with, what we've got to do next is just pay attention to this import as section right there. So inside of this little drop down menu, we have three different options. The first one being footage. Then we have composition, retain layer sizes. Then we have composition by itself. So as a quick explanation, the composition is going to be your project. So if we were to choose either one of these composition options there, that will create a project for us. Whereas if we was to choose footage, what this essentially is going to do once we hit that open button is it's going to copy that over to our project window, and it'll store it there till we decide to use it in one of our projects. And I will just demonstrate that a little bit later on. But at the moment, because I want to use this file, we're going to go ahead and import this as a composition retain layer sizes. And the reason I've chose to retain layer sizes is because if we look at my dimensions right here on my file, these are the dimensions to a 4K file. So essentially what this is going to do now with retaining the layer sizes, it's going to take all the information from this document and it's going to apply it to my composition or my project, meaning it will automatically just apply this as a 4K video. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit that open button. Then after hitting the open button, you'll be presented with this window right here. And you can see with this import kind, we can change that if you imported that as a wrong kind of file. And also underneath that, we have these layer options where we've got editable layer styles and merge layer styles into footage. Because I'm importing a PSD file, which is a Photoshop document, this contains all different layers that make up my logo. So I'm just going to go ahead and import that as editable layer styles. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. So looking at our screen, it doesn't seem like anything's really happened apart from over here in our project window. We now have these files imported. And if we just go ahead and open up this little drop down menu there, we can see all three of these layers that make up my logo. And the way we would start animating these is we've got to open up our project or our composition. And that is what this file is right there. You can see it says composition. So if we now double tap onto this, we can now see my logo is visible in the composition window. And we can also see that all of the files are available down here inside of our timeline. And we'll talk about this in just a moment. But what I want to do at this point is just urge you to save your file, as it's always good practice to save your project before you begin in case anything happens along the way, such as your computer crashes or a power cut, etc. So if we just go all the way up to the top menu where it says file, then we just go down to save as, and we can just save this as anything you like. I'm just going to go ahead and call this demo and just go ahead and hit that save button. And now we can continue with the tutorial. So what we're going to do now is talk about some of the features and functions that we have available inside of our timeline. So if we just pay attention to this bottom left hand corner, we can see that I've got 3 individual layers in here, which make up the design for my logo. And when I select on either one of these layers, if we look in the composition window, you can see that it will highlight any layer that I'm currently selected, which visually makes it easier to know what it is that you're currently working on, especially when you end up with hundreds of layers inside of here. So the reason I have access to all 3 of these layers is because I imported this file as a PSD file, which is a Photoshop document, meaning that when I created this in Photoshop, it retained all of the information and I was able to import it with 3 different layers. However, if I was to import this as a JPEG file or a PNG, then this would not be possible. It would only be 1 layer, then we'd have to individually cut it out. So if you guys have access to maybe Photoshop or Illustrator or Affinity Photo or Affinity Designer, I definitely recommend that you create your logos inside of those programs and then just import it as a PSD. However, if you don't, it really doesn't matter. We can just simply bring in a JPEG file and just cut out the areas that we want to animate. So moving on now with the tutorial, if we just head over to the left hand side, we're going to talk about some of these icons and what they do. So on the far left hand side, we've got this little eye icon. And this is a toggle button that will turn the visibility of our layers on and off. So if we just have a look now at our creative designs up here in our composition window, if I check that off, it's going to disappear. And that works across all of the layers. It's just a way of showing or hiding specific layers. So next to that one, we have the audio mute button. And at the moment, we don't have any audio inside of this composition, so we do not have this checkbox available. However, if you did have audio in here, you simply have that inside of there also. Then to the right of that, we have our solo button. So this is really useful if you end up with lots and lots of layers inside of here and you want to work on something individually. So if I just go ahead and select this MJW Media Studios right there, and I'll go and hit that solo button, it's now going to turn off all the other layers I have inside of here, such as the play button and the creative designs. So it simply just isolates layers, and you can do more than one. You can have multiple ones of these. It's entirely up to you. So then next to that, this is self-explanatory. You have your lock layers button, and you just simply turn these on if you don't want to disturb any of your layers or move them by accident. Then next to that on the right hand side, we have this little arrow, which is going to access our drop down menu. So if we go ahead and tap on that, you can see underneath now we have our transform menu. And this is another sub menu that may just open up for you like that. So just go ahead and drop down that menu as well if you don't see all of this. So inside of here, these are all the parameters which are going to control the animation of any of our layers. And every layer that we have in here are all going to have the same options. And we have all different options ranging from our anchor point position to the position of the layer and the scale or the rotation and opacity. And we're going to cover all of these as we go through the tutorial. Then over to the left hand side, we have all these little stopwatch icons. And what these are used for are creating keyframes. And keyframes are kind of the nuts and bolts of After Effects and are used to make everything work in terms of animating. And we'll find out just how they work in just a moment. But just for now, we're going to go ahead and just close down that little drop down menu. Then over here on the right hand side, we've got some more additional options. These are generally just for applying effects, etc. And we'll talk more about this as we go on. Then over here, we've got the parent and link. And this is just a way of us assigning one layer to another. So essentially kind of grouping those together. And that's something we'll talk about as we go on as well. Then to the right of that, we have all of these clips inside of here, which are for our layers. And these are going to be where we determine at what point we want them to come on and off. So if we have a look above these, we've got our time ruler right there. And inside of here, we have our frames. So you got 5, 10, 15, 20. Then you got 1 second, and then that'll just repeat. So you got 5, 10, 15, 20, 2 seconds. And at the moment, we haven't covered how we're going to set the duration of your composition, but we'll do that in just a moment. So if you decide that you want maybe MJW Media Studios to start at 2 seconds, all we got to do to trim this is simply come to the end or the beginning of the clip till we see this little arrow pointing in both the left and right direction. Just simply pull down on your mouse and just pull that across and then line that up with that 2 second mark just there. And it's exactly the same on the opposite direction. If you want to trim it shorter on that side, maybe bring that down to 4 seconds. So essentially, if we go back to the beginning of this now and we hit spacebar for play, you're going to see at 2 seconds, it will come on and go off. So here we go by pressing play. Now it will come on and it'll go off again. So that is generally basic animation, but we're going to make it a little bit better than that. So at the moment, I'm just going to hit Command or Control Z just to undo that and reset that back to how it started. And we're going to talk more about this as we go on. So you keep hearing the word composition a lot, and at this point you may not understand exactly what that is. The composition is your project. So if we just look right here, we can see it says MJW Media Studios logo, and this is the composition, and these layers are what are contained inside of our composition or project. And we have some settings inside of our composition where we can change the duration and just things like that. And the way we're going to access that is if we go up now back to our project window and we have a look here at our composition file. If we just simply right click on this composition text and we go ahead and choose that composition settings, inside of here is where we're going to get all the settings that we need to set up our composition. So first of all, you got the name up here, which is MJW Media Studios logo. And this is all because I imported that PSD. It already knows the settings that I wanted. As I said, in Photoshop, I created this originally as a 4K document. So straight away, it's recognized that this is a 4K preset. So it's automatically set that for me with the width and the height, as you can see there. So most of the time, all you got to simply do is just choose one of these presets in terms of what it is that you want to create, just to make things quick and easy. And most of this you can just go ahead and ignore. The frame rate is usually around 25 for 4K anyway, so you'd leave that the way it is, and you'll find when you change these, it's going to change the frame rate for you. However, if you do want to get completely custom with this, you can simply do that just by changing your width and your height and putting in your own frame rate. So then underneath that, we have this resolution. And this is kind of an important thing. It depends on the speed and the power of your computer as to what you're going to choose inside of here. I'm on an iMac Pro, so it's a pretty high spec computer. So I don't really have many problems with running things at full power or full resolution. So if you do have a computer that may struggle when you end up with hundreds of layers and is trying to render everything at once, you can just simply come in here and you can change this full to half or third or quarter or custom. No matter what you choose in here, it really does not matter when it comes to exporting your file. When you come to export your file, it's going to be at full resolution anyway. This is just a way really of you having the option to change the resolution inside of your project. So when you come to run multiple files, it's not going to struggle as much, as essentially it's shrinking the file. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But in a nutshell, if you've got a powerful computer, you are fine to leave that on full. If you don't, just choose any of these other options that you like. If you find you choose half and it's still struggling, take that down to a third. If you find once again it's struggling on a third, then just take it down to a quarter. It's just trial and error just to see what your computer can handle. So then underneath that, we've got our start time code, and you can go ahead and leave that as it is. As you can see, that will start right from the beginning. Then underneath that is our duration, and this is where we're going to determine how long we want our clip to be or our animation. For me, I've got this at 6 seconds. But all you got to simply do is just double tap in here and change these numbers to whatever it is that you want. So underneath that, we have our background color. And as you can see right now, mine is black, but you can choose any color that you like. And you can also sample a color there if you want to. So as a starting point, I wouldn't worry about your advanced section or your 3D renderer. You can go ahead and just ignore that and just stick with your basic. And then once you've got everything you want inside of there, just go ahead and hit that OK button. So there is just a quick way of showing you how you access the settings to any composition that you may have created. So what we're going to talk about next is if you did not create a composition when you first open up your file, then we can go ahead and show you how we do that now. So there are a few ways that you can create a new composition. The first way is inside of our project window, we can just right click on our mouse and we can choose that new composition right there. Another way of doing this is going up to our top menu bar where it says composition, and there again we've got new composition. And another way is right down here, we've got this little icon right there that looks like a rectangle with some shapes inside of it. So what I want to quickly mention is it really does not matter how many compositions you have. You can create as many as these as you like and just keep switching back and forward. So if we go ahead and just select this button here and create a new composition, we are back to this same window that we had just a moment ago. So you can change everything in here inside of this composition if you want it to be different to the other one. But just to demonstrate, I'm going to leave this as it is for now. I'm going to leave it as comp 1. So once you've got everything you want for a new composition, just hit that OK button. And now down here towards the left hand bottom of the screen, you can now see that we have our new composition right there. And next to that on the left hand side, we have our original MJW Media Studios logo. And inside of that, we've got our original layers that we had. So once we go into our new composition, at the moment it's completely empty. And there are a number of ways that we can assign files into this composition as well. If we just make our way up to our project window and we just open up our folder right here, and I'm just going to use these same files as an example, but you can go ahead and import any other files inside of here if you wanted to. So if I want to now bring any of these files into our new composition, I can either simply select that and drag it down and drop it inside of there. So now you can see this is now inside of that new composition, and there is our original. And another way that we can bring this in is just by simply selecting another layer, and then we can just drop that on top of the composition that we want to use. So that comp 1 right there, just simply drop on top. And then you can see that is also available down there as well. And just as I stated, it really does not matter how many compositions you can have. You can have as many as you like, and you can import as many files into your project window as you want. But once you do that, what is good practice is to start putting things in folders. So if you start bringing in maybe loads of JPEGs, or PNG files or video files, it's always good just to right click and go ahead and create a new folder. And then you can just go ahead and rename that. And then you can just drag any kind of file types that you have into it. It's just a way of staying organized, and it's definitely going to help you out in the long run. But just for now, I'm going to go ahead and hit delete on my keyboard to get rid of that because I don't need it at this moment in time, as well as this new composition I just created. I'm going to go ahead and delete that also. And you can see that I've got the pop-up window which says, are you sure you want to delete the composition? So I'm just going to go ahead and hit delete. And now we are back to just this one composition down here at the bottom. And no matter how many you create, it's going to go side by side all the way over. And you can just keep switching in between either composition that you want to use. So I hope at this point that I'm not confusing you too much and now you understand what a composition is. Essentially, it is just a project which will contain all of your layers that you want to animate. So now moving on, we are going to start animating this so you can learn a little bit about keyframes and how you would use those. So quickly before we continue, if you've accidentally closed any of your compositions that you have down here, just by hitting that little X in the corner there, and you're not entirely sure how you would get back to that project, then all you got to do is go to your project window and find any composition file that you want to work on and just simply double tap on that. And then that will reopen up your timeline and get you back to where you was. So with that said, let's go ahead and start animating this logo. So the first thing I really need to point out, and this is going to be an important step for pretty much most of you, if we just go ahead and select this MJW Media Studios, we can see over in our composition window that all this text is in one layer. So it's not individual on the MJW, the media and the studios. And I actually want these to be separate layers. So what we're going to have to do is we need to cut these out so we can animate them separately. And this is something that you're going to have to do on every file that you import that may have everything all in one layer if it's not created inside of After Effects. If we was to create this logo inside of After Effects, we could have put these on separate layers originally. But because we've imported the PSD file, what we've got in front of us is kind of what we're stuck with. So all we can do in this sense is just go ahead and cut this out and put them into separate layers manually. I mean, essentially, you could take your file back into Photoshop and separate the layers there, then just save that document and re-import it. But if that isn't an option for some of you, then we can just go ahead and start cutting this out using masks. And the way that a mask works is it just shows or hides certain parts of your design. So first of all, what we need to do is go ahead and select the layer that we want to start masking on. And in this case, it's the MJW Media Studios. So then I'm just going to make my way over to the top menu bar where we have all of these different icons and tools right there. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select that rectangle. So once I've selected that, what I need to do now is just start to trace around this MJW. So I'm just going to start somewhere around here and then just start to draw over that. So you can see what's going on here. It just generally starts to reveal what is inside of the box and it hides everything that isn't. So once I've got all that MJW into the position where I need it all, I can just go ahead and let go of my mouse. So this is my first layer complete. And all we got to generally do is just come down here for a second and just close that drop down menu. And we're just going to duplicate this. So if we just go ahead and hit Command or Control D, then that's going to make another layer right there. Then we just need to open up the little drop down menu on this second layer. And you can see now we've got this masks option that we didn't have originally. And all you got to do is select this mask and just go ahead and delete that. And now you can see on this layer, we have the rest of the logo visible. And we just got to go in at this point and do the exact same thing as before. So we don't want to be on that top layer. We now want to be on a new duplicated layer. Go ahead and make sure you selected that rectangle once again. This time around, we're going to draw around the media. And exactly the same principle as before. Just fill up all that text. You got everything in where you need it. Go ahead and let go of that. And now you can see we've got two separate layers in here. So we can just go ahead and turn that off. Just like that. Once again, exactly the same principle. Now we are going to duplicate this middle layer. So Command or Control D. Then we're going to go back onto this layer that we just duplicated. We're going to go down and open up a drop down menu once again. Delete that mask. And then finally, we're just going to draw our rectangle around the studios. So once again, make sure you are on your rectangle. And then we're just going to isolate that one as well. And make sure you got all your text in. It is as simple as that. So at this point now, we can go ahead and close that. And we do have all of our individual layers for this logo, as you can see by toggling that on and off. So you can see how straightforward and easy that actually was. And all we got to do now for organization purposes and knowing what layer is which is we just got to go ahead and rename them. And we can rename these in two different ways. So first of all, you may double click on one of these layers. And 99% of the time in any other program that will give you the option to rename your file. However, that does not work inside After Effects. If you was to double tap on any of these files just to demonstrate, it is going to actually isolate that layer and open it up into a new window over here. So if you've done that by accident, all you got to do is go ahead and just close that layer just there. And then that'll take you back to where you was. So if you need to rename these layers now, we can do this in two different ways. The first one is just make sure you select either layer that you want to rename. Just go ahead and hit the return key on your keyboard. And you can see now we can rename this. So this one is going to be MJW. And then I can just go ahead and select the next one. And to rename this, if you want to do it a different way, just go ahead and right click on your mouse. And just at the bottom here, you have the rename option. So this one is going to be called Media. And finally, the one underneath, I'm just going to go ahead and hit return on this one, is going to be my studios. And that is as simple as that for renaming your layers. So now we can see exactly what it is that we are working on. So hopefully you found that pretty easy to understand in terms of using masks and cutting out certain parts of your images. If for any reason you need some extra help with this, let me know in the comments and I'll try my best to help you out. So now with all of these layers being individual, we can go ahead and actually start animating our logo. So to start animating this, we are going to make our way down to the bottom left hand corner of our timeline. And we're just going to select any of the layers that we want to animate first. So for me, it's going to be the creative designs. Once you've selected your layer, just make your way over to the left to your little arrow icon. Go ahead and open that up so we can see all of the properties for our layer. And inside of here, you're going to see all these different numbers. And what these numbers are for are just to determine the location that this is currently at inside of your composition. And these numbers will change when you start moving things around or scaling them to be a different size or rotating them. All things we'll talk about in just a moment. So what I want to address straight away is your position right here. You can see we've got two separate numbers, one on the left and one on the right. The one on your left is going to be your X, and the one on the right is going to be your Y axis. So you got your X and your Y. And this is used to either move your graphic from left to right or up or down. So if we first look at our X axis here on the left, if we select that with our mouse and start dragging to the left, you can see that the Creative Designs is now moving to the left. Or if we go over to the right, it's going to move it in that direction. It's exactly the same principle with your Y axis. This time you just got to select that and move up or down with your mouse, and then that'll move that into a different position as well. Alternatively, you don't have to do that inside of here. You can do it manually with your mouse. So if we just start to move this now with our mouse, you're going to see our numbers down here will change as well. So we'll go ahead and just move that anywhere on the screen. You can see how the numbers are changing. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead and Command or Control Z just to put that back to where we started. And now we can begin animating this entire logo. So the first thing we need to think about is at what moment in time or how far into the animation do we want this entire logo to be visible the way it is right now? I think for me, I'm going to want this to be around 2 seconds. So I'm going to come down to my time ruler just down here. I'm going to find that 2-second mark just there. I'm going to select on that so it moves my playhead to that 2 seconds. Then what I need to do next is now tell After Effects that at 2 seconds, I want this Creative Designs to be in this position. And the way we're going to do that is go over back to the left hand side, and we're going to now click on our little stopwatch right there, and that is now going to mark our position. So you can see this is now turned blue, and if I go ahead and move this playhead out the way, we can now see we've got our keyframe right there. So essentially this keyframe is just a way of telling After Effects that at 2 seconds this needs to be exactly where it is right now. So in order to animate this, we're going to now bring this all the way back to the start. But this time round, we don't go and select our little stopwatch icon to create a keyframe. As you can see, this is already blue, and that means it's already enabled. So all we got to do now to create a new keyframe is either change any of these numbers or properties we have inside of here, or alternatively, go ahead and move up to your composition window and just move this around with your mouse. That then will tell After Effects to automatically create a keyframe for us. However, if you do accidentally go ahead and select your stopwatch thinking that you're going to create a new keyframe, what this is actually going to do is a complete opposite to that. It's going to remove what we've already put in. So at the moment, we can see at the 2 second mark, we've got our keyframe there. If we just go ahead and hit that now, it's going to remove it. So essentially, it's going to undo any keyframes that you've already created. So first things first, let's move that playhead back to the 2 seconds. Go ahead and create our position keyframe once again. Move that back to the start. And now we can start animating this by adjusting some of these numbers. So from this point, I'm going to make this animation really simple just so you guys understand how this works. I don't want to overcomplicate this. So I think I'm going to have the Creative Designs just drop in from the top there. I'm going to have the MJW coming from the left, the media coming from the right, and the studios maybe from the bottom. And I think we'll have the play button just scale in. So we'll go ahead and get started with that now. So with our little stopwatch blue, which means it's enabled, we can go ahead and start adjusting some of these numbers to change that. And remember, we've got our X on the left-hand side and a Y. So the X is left and right and the Y is up and down. So at this point, I want to move my Y position as I want this to come in from the top. So I'm going to select that now on my mouse and I'm going to start dragging up till it removes that graphic off the screen and we can no longer see it. Just like that. So if we now come down to our timeline and we just move that playhead, you can see there is our new keyframe that has just been created by After Effects. And if we just move that back now, and if we now hit spacebar on our keyboard, we're going to see this animate down. And it really is just that simple to start making animations. So first things first, that may have came in a little bit slow for your liking. If it did, all you got to simply do is adjust your keyframes right here to a different position. So I'm going to move my playhead over to this 1 second mark. I'm just going to drag that keyframe over to the 1 second. And I'll play that again, and that'll come in a lot quicker than it did. So that's looking better than it was. So that is a Creative Designs already animated in. So once again, we're going to mark our position here on our next layer. So I'm going to go ahead and close the Creative Designs for a moment. I'm going to open up the MJW, open up the transform section. And once again, we've got our position right here. So we're first going to mark our position as being where it is right now at the 1 second mark. Then move our playhead back to the beginning. And now we can start animating the MJW from coming in from the left-hand side. This time around, I'm not going to do this inside of the properties. I'm going to do it with my mouse. So all I've got to do is simply just drag this over to the left hand side. So if I select that layer and start pulling to the left, if you hold down shift on your keyboard, that is going to keep that perfectly straight as you adjust it. So all you got to do now is just take that completely off the screen and then just let go of your keyboard and mouse. Then as you can see down here, we have our new keyframe created automatically. So now if we press spacebar again on our keyboard, we can see both of these animating together, just like that. And now we're going to do the media and the studio. So once again, take that back to that 1 second. Select our next layer over here, which is going to be the media. Open up your properties, down to your transform menu, mark your position, take that back to the start like we did before. And on this one, I want it to come in from the right hand side. So once again, we'll do this with our mouse. I'm just going to start to pull this over to the right, hold down shift, just to keep that perfectly straight. Take that completely off the screen. And now that one is also complete. So we can go ahead and play that back and see how all three of those come together. And finally, we're going to do the studios and then the play button, and then it will be finished. So back over to our layers, we're now going to open up our studios, go down to our transform properties, mark our first position, take that all the way back to the beginning with our playhead. And this time around, we're going to come from the bottom upwards. So like I said, you can either do this with your mouse just by simply dragging that down, or go ahead and adjust your Y position. I think I'll just adjust my Y position at this point and start dragging that down. You may have to keep coming back and adjusting this and letting go of your mouse if you don't have a big desk. So that is that finished now, and all that is left to do is going to be this play button. So if we just go ahead and play this entire animation back, you can see how all the logos coming together. So you can see that once you've originally decided where you want to put your start and your finish positions, that After Effects is going to take care of any animation in between that. And it really is that simple to get started. Okay, so now we're at this 1 second mark, and this is where my logo is fully visible. I think looking at my play button, I don't want this to be visible at 1 second, and that I actually want this to come in a little bit later on in time. So the first thing I need to think about is, when do I want this to animate in? So I think I'm going to bring this to about 1.5 seconds. So coming down to my time ruler, I'm just going to move that over to maybe that 15 frames right there. Then I'm going to come over to my layers on the left hand side. I'm going to close my studio layers. Then I'm going to open up my play button. And same as we did before, we're going to first mark our position. And this time round, we are going to add an additional keyframe, which is going to be the scale keyframe. So if we go ahead and select that one as well, we now have 2 keyframes inside of here. So I'm going to bring this playhead now back to the 1 second and come back over to my layer properties. And this time I'm going to focus only on the scale option, and where it says 100 there, I'm just going to tap on that. I'm just going to type in 0 and hit the return key on my keyboard. And now that has disappeared. So in theory, this should scale up from being 0 to 100%. So if we bring this back to the start now and we just play this back, we can see how it comes together. So before we go ahead and continue to animate the logo back out, there's just something else that I want to address, and that is going to be in regards to our keyframe animations. So the way this is already set up is that when our logo comes to a stop, everything just stops instantly and doesn't look very professional. So I'll play this back, but you may not be able to notice it on your screen. But if you did see what happened there, when it comes to a stop, it just kind of moves over and then just instantly stops, and that doesn't look great. So what we need to do is just change the animation type so it makes it a little bit smoother. So essentially what will happen is, at the beginning of the keyframe, it's going to start off slow and it's going to speed up. And as it gets towards the end, it's going to slow down a little bit before it stops. And the way we're going to go ahead and do that is open up the first layer we're going to work with, which is going to be that Creative Designs. Go and find our keyframes that we want to change. And all we have to do here is simply tap on the keyframe by right clicking on your mouse, go down to where it says Keyframe Assistant at the bottom, and we've got 3 different options inside of here. So the 2 we're going to pay attention to right now is going to be Easy Ease In and Easy Ease Out. So the way this is going to work is, the keyframe right here is at the beginning of the animation. So if I bring the playhead there, it's right at the beginning, and now this is going to come out of the keyframe. And as it moves along, it's then going to come into that keyframe. So that is all you need to remember. It's coming out of that one and it's going into that one. So what we need to do here is we've got to go back down to our keyframe assistant. And on this one, we're going to choose Easy Ease Out, because it is coming out from that side. And on this side is coming into the keyframe. So right click again, back down to keyframe assistant. And this time we're going to go for Easy Ease In. And now you can see that the keyframes have changed shape, just to show you that the animation has changed. So I hope that makes sense to what I've just explained. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the rest of these layers. So I'm just going to go and shut that one, open up MJW, do the same thing here. Remember, it's coming into this keyframe, so it's going to be easy ease in. And this one here is coming out of it because that is our starting point. If that happens, just simply hit cancel and just right click on that again. Back down to keyframe assistant and easy ease out. Okay, so I've just cut out the section here in the video of where I've applied this to all the keyframes so you didn't have to sit there and watch it. But what I want to show you here on the play button section is on our keyframes there, this kind of starts off at 1 second. So essentially it's coming in and then it's going out again. So what we need to do in the sense of this one right here, as it's not right at the beginning, is we've got to right click on that one, back down to keyframe assistant. And this time we want to choose easy ease. That way it is essentially applying the easy ease in and the easy ease out together. So if we go ahead and select that one for that keyframe, and you can see once again, we now have a different icon to show us what kind of keyframe that is. And on these last ones, like we did before, these are going into the keyframe. So just go ahead and put that as in and also put that one in. And now if I go ahead and play this back, you may not notice it, but you may also notice a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and play this now and just see how it looks a little bit smoother. So now that looks a little bit more professional than what it did to start with. So what we're going to also do now is, because these are moving layers or moving objects, it's always good to apply a motion blur to this just to make it look a little bit more authentic. Just over here on the right hand side, we have these 3 little circles, which are our motion blur section. So all we've got to do is just check all of these boxes, and we can just simply tap the top one and drag down on our mouse to highlight the rest of those. And then once we play that back, that is going to apply a motion blur for us. So that already that is looking better to me. So what I want to talk about next is a way that we can group all of these layers together. And that way we can just go over to the right hand side, find ourselves an effect that we can apply to that one layer rather than all of these individually. And the way that we are going to do that is just by selecting all of these layers. If you tap on your mouse anywhere within this gray area and just drag across your layers, that will select all of those. Then right click on your mouse, and we're going to go down towards the bottom where it says pre-compose. So just go ahead and select that option. Then you'll be presented with this pop-up window in front of us. And all we've got to do in here is just give this a new name. So I'm just going to call that logo and just go ahead and hit OK. So what this has essentially done is it's created a new composition inside of our original composition. So you can see right there, we are still inside of MJW Media Studios. But now we have a new composition that says a logo, and that is going to contain all of our files. So really just think of this as being a group rather than anything more than that. And the way you're going to access all your files that you had inside of there is just by double tapping on that. And now you can see we've got access to all the files that we had originally. And if we just go slightly up here to the top, you can see we've got that new window there, which is our logo composition, our new group that we just created. Then next to that is our original MJW Media Studios logo with the new composition inside of it. So you can go ahead and just close that logo one. And if you ever need to get back in there at any point, just double tap once again and we're back to where we started. So once again, I'm going to close that and continue to work over here. So I hope all that made sense to you and I didn't overcomplicate that. So if we just go ahead and hit spacebar on our keyboard, it's just going to play as it originally did. There's going to be no difference in the animation whatsoever. It's still reading all the information from the new composition or group. But now we have the option to apply an effect to this entire group rather than having to do it all individually, which would take a lot more time. But what we're going to do now is just make our way over to the right hand side of the screen where we have our effects and presets. Mine is already open, but if you guys don't have yours open, just go ahead and open that up. Then inside of here in our search bar, we are just going to search for the effect that we want to use. For what I'm thinking of, I'm going to go for a blur. So I'm just going to type in blur and see what options we have inside of here. One of my favorites is the Gaussian or Gaussian blur right down there. So I'm going to use that one. So once you've found something that you want to use, despite what kind of effect you are going for, just simply tap it and just drag it all the way over to your composition window and then drop that on top of your new composition. So at the moment, when we go ahead and play this back, nothing will happen and everything is still the way that it was. But if you go ahead and make our way over to the top left-hand side, now we have some additional options inside of here, which are going to control our blur. So all we really need to do is just change a couple of these parameters, such as this blurriness right there. So if we select that with our mouse and just start dragging that across until our logo gets as blurry as you like it to be. For me, somewhere around maybe 100 is going to look pretty good. So just like that. At the moment, we can't make that out at all. So if we play that back, it is very blurry. So that is kind of what I'm going for. But the way we want to now make this work is I want it to blur at 2 seconds. So it's going to come in as normal all the way across till it gets to the 2-second mark. Then it's going to blur a little bit, and then we'll maybe add a glitch effect, and then we'll have that animate back out. So what we need to do now is go ahead and work on our keyframes once again. So if we go back over to our logo composition and we open up to our properties like we did before on our layers, this time we're going to go down to where it says effects. Go ahead and open that up as well. Open up your Gaussian blur or Gaussian blur, however you like to pronounce that. And just underneath here, we have our blurriness option that we just changed up there on the top left-hand side. Then all we got to do is just determine where in time you want our keyframes to go and take effect. So first of all, I want this to animate in around 2 seconds. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring this to maybe around 1 second or maybe 1 second at that 5-frame mark. This is because I want it to slowly animate into the blur before it becomes fully visible. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to mark my first keyframe with my little stopwatch. I'm going to change this 100 to be a 0. Go ahead and hit enter on my keyboard. Then I'm going to move this over to the 2-second mark. And I'm going to go and change now this 0 to be 100. That way it's going to fade into the blur. So if we just bring this back to the start now and play that back, we can see how that works. And now we just got to decide when we want this to come off. So I think maybe around the 3 seconds, we'll have it to blur back out again slowly. So here is another thing that I need to mention. Because we've got this keyframe over here, and as you can see, it's going to be 100% from this point. If I now want this to start to blur from this 3-second mark and fade out when it gets to 4, I have to create a new keyframe over here. As if I don't do that, it's going to start animating from this point till it gets all the way down here. So in order to make a new keyframe, we're just going to put that over towards a 3 or maybe just 1 frame past that. We need to come back over to the left-hand side, and instead of pressing our keyframe stopwatch right there, as that's going to disable the keyframes, what we need to do is come over to the left of that. And you can see we've got this little diamond right there. If you just select that diamond, that is going to put a brand new keyframe in there for us. And that's going to have the exact same properties that we originally had. So that 100%. And now we know nothing is going to change from this point to that point. So it's always going to stay 100 from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Then from 3 seconds up to 4 seconds is going to animate back out again. So the blur just disappears. So now we've got that one in place. We can come over to the 4 seconds. And we can go ahead and just change this 100. We don't need to create another keyframe because we've already got that one in place. So just simply change that again back to 0. And then that is going to fade us back out again. So I hope this makes sense. It is a little bit complicated, but you will get your head around it once you've had a little play around with this for a while. As occasionally you are going to have to add additional keyframes in here to get certain effects. So if we just play this back now, we can see how it all comes together. So it's fading in and it fades back out again. So at this point, I think we're going to put maybe a little glitch on it just to give it that glitch effect. And then we're going to have that animate back out again. So in order to do that, we're just going to go back over to the left-hand side and we can go ahead and close that Gaussian or Gaussian blur. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. And now just go back over to the right and we're going to now search for a glitch effect. And we'll go ahead and choose that one right there, which is our VR digital glitch. So once again, select that and just drag that on top of your logo composition to apply that effect. And now you can see we've got the glitch effect on top of our logo. But just like before with the blur effect, it's going to apply to the entire duration of the clip. So if we play that back, it's going to apply from the start to the end. And that's not what we want to do. We want this to take effect after the blur goes back to normal, so around 4 seconds. So just like before, we have some options up here where we can start to change all of the effects inside of here. If you want to have a little play around with that, I'm not going to change too much in here as I don't want to waste too much of your time on this. So I'm going to leave it just as default the way it is at the moment. So once again, we're going to go down to our layers in our composition window. And this time we're going to open up the VR digital glitch and see all of the properties that we have inside of here. So all we really need to change is going to be this master amplitude in order to turn the effect on and off. So it's going to be the exact same principle that it was before. We're going to want to set this a couple of keyframes before so it can kind of fade into the effect. So at that 4-second mark, we're going to go ahead and apply our first keyframe with our stopwatch on the master amplitude, and we'll change that to be a 0. And then we're going to move this slightly over to maybe 5 frames, and then we'll apply that as being 100. So then that effect is going to take place. And I only want this to really animate for that 1 second before it fades back out, or whatever way we're going to animate this. So I'm going to bring this now over to this 20 frame mark, and we're going to add an additional keyframe just like we did before. So we're going to come back over to the left hand side, and we're going to select that diamond just so we've got a new keyframe, and that's going to keep that 100% that we've already got. Then when we come over to the 5 seconds, we can go ahead and change the new keyframe back to 0. And then that is a glitch effect finished. So if we play this back now, we can see it all come together once again, and we can see all the effects taking place. So I don't like the way that glitch goes looking at that. I think if we remove one of these keyframes, it may actually look better. So if we just go ahead and delete this one right here, and we maybe center that one instead. So it's going to fade in from this point. It's going to be at 100 there, and it's going to fade back out again, or maybe just move it over a little bit. And then we'll see if that looks better starting from the beginning. It's always trial and error just to keep playing with it and see what you can achieve. So yeah, that definitely looked better the way it was. So now all that is actually left to do at this 5-second point is just animate this logo back out again, and then it's completely finished. And the way we're going to animate this out is going to be similar to the way we animated it in. Only this time round, maybe rather than the creative designs coming from the top, we're going to have that go down to the bottom, the studios go up to the top, and just have these going in different directions. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So what we need to do straight away is go ahead and close the effects menu inside of our composition. And we need to go inside of our composition once again. So now we can start working on all of these layers like we did originally. And we'll first start on our creative design. So if we open up the properties inside of our creative designs, open up the transform, and now we can see all of our keyframes. So we're going to want this to start animating out around 5 seconds. So I'm going to put on the 5 seconds. I'm going to go over here now to my position. And just like before, we need to create a brand new keyframe that's going to start at 5 seconds. If we start changing these numbers now, it is going to start animating from 1 second all the way through till 5. And that's not what we want to do. So we need to create that brand new keyframe by going over to the left-hand side like before and just clicking on our little diamond shape. And as you can see, we've got the exact same position numbers here all the way through from 1 second till we get to 5. And now we can start to animate this to go in a different direction. So we're going to drag our playhead all the way to the end. And this time around, I'm going to have the creative designs go out towards the bottom rather than the top. So I'm going to start to drag that on my mouse, hold down my shift key so it stays completely straight as I drag it down, and just take that off the screen. Somewhere around there will be perfectly fine. So if we just play that back, we can see now it's going to start animating down. And it's going to be the same principle now across the rest of the layers. So back to the 5 seconds. And now we're going to start opening up all of the other layers and applying the same effect. Once again, on our position, we want to create a brand new keyframe. So we select our little diamond, and then we're going to go ahead and drag that all the way to the end. And now decide which way we want the MJW to move. So I think I'm going to have that go over to the left-hand side. So I'm going to just start dragging that while holding down shift to keep it straight, and just take that off the screen also. And exactly the same thing across all of these. So I just cut the video at this point so you didn't have to see me apply that to each one of these layers, but it's the exact same thing that we did on the first couple of layers. So if I play this back now, you can see what it is I did. At the moment, I haven't applied it to the play button, so I want to do something a little bit different there. So you can just see they're all going in different directions. So with the play button, I'm going to go ahead now and just open up that one. And we're going to go back down to our transform. And once again, we need to go back to the 5 seconds because that is where it's going to start to animate out. And then we'll go ahead and add a brand new keyframe once again, just on our scale. I'm going to ignore the position for this one. So now I've got that in its position at 5 seconds. I'm going to bring that all the way to the end like we did before. And this time around, I'm going to have this scale up rather than coming in from 0. I'm going to have it go out to around 1,000 just to see what that kind of effect looks like. So inside of here, I'm just going to type in 1,000. That may not be enough, so I'm going to quickly try that. I'm going to need to go a little bit higher than that. So I think maybe I'm just going to blow this right up. I'm going to go for 5,000. And now we can't see anything but black. So hopefully it's going to look pretty good when we come to animate this from the beginning. So if I hit play on the space bar, we can see how it all comes together now with animating in and out. I quite like that. That is looking pretty good. So you'll notice straight away that we haven't got the blur effect and the glitch and all that kind of stuff. And the reason for that is because at the moment we are working inside of our logo composition. So all we're going to see in terms of animation are what we got with our layers right here. In order to see the entire thing working together, all we got to do is go back to the original composition, which contains our logo composition inside it, and then play this one from the beginning by hitting spacebar on our keyboard, and we can see all these animations come together. So there's our blur followed by our glitch, and then it's going to shoot off in different directions as it finishes the animation. So as you can see, that's a pretty good animated logo, very basic and easy to do. So I hope you guys have a good understanding of some of the basic tools that you're going to be using to create an animated logo. As I stated at the beginning of the tutorial, I'm not going to be able to cover every single feature and function inside of After Effects, as it will take far too much of your time. So what we're going to do next is talk about how we can create some text and shapes and animate those as well. But before we do that, I just want to focus your attention over here on the left hand side, where we have all of our properties for the effect that we've just applied to our pre-composition, which is our logo right there. If you want to know how to get rid of this section right here, all you got to do is come off the effects controls and go back to the project and just select that one, and then that'll go back to our original files. So next we're going to go ahead and create a brand new composition just with our little rectangle down here with the shapes inside of them. And I'm just going to keep that as comp 1 and leave all these settings as they are. Just go ahead and hit OK. And to insert some text into our project, we just need to go to our toolbar up here on the top left hand corner, and we're going to select that T, which is going to be for text. If we hold down on our mouse, you can see we've got two options in here, such as horizontal or vertical. You can choose any of those that you like. I'm just going to go for horizontal. And then I'm just going to come to our composition window and just start typing anywhere inside of here. I'm just going to write in your text to make it quick and easy. And we'll just go ahead and highlight that so we can change some of the properties. So once you've completed your text, you'll see down in your timeline, we have a brand new layer created automatically for us. This is going to have some of the same parameters that we already had inside of the transform. So we can go ahead and animate that in the same way. We have some additional options inside of the text menu. And as I stated at the beginning of the tutorial, all of your text formatting tools will be found on the right hand side inside of your character section. And with your text highlighted, you can come in here and you can change the font if you want something different, as well as the weight of your font, or maybe make the text a lot bigger so you can see it. Just going to make that a lot bigger so you guys can see that on your screen. And we can also change the color right here to be something else, maybe go for red. And we also have the option to give this a outline or a stroke, just with that box in the background of the red. If we go ahead and swap that around and then just double tap and give this a color of white perhaps. And we can change the thickness of this just with this little drop down menu right here, just where you can see these three little lines, and we can go ahead and just make that a lot thicker to whatever it is that you prefer. So it's just a case of you guys having a little play around with this. We also have the paragraph section where you can align all your text to however you want it to look, but all of this is going to be down to your personal preference. Okay, so let's talk about how we can animate this text. Although we could just simply animate this text like we did our logo, just by coming down to our layers in our timeline and adding keyframes and moving them into position, there is a more efficient way of doing this inside of After Effects when working with text. And that is going to be by using your effects and presets over here on the right hand side. So once we select on there, all we need to do is go to animation presets, open that one up and go ahead and look for text. So if we open up the text one, you can see we have many different types of animations inside of here that we can apply to our text. And all we got to do is simply drag this and drop it on top of our text layer down here in our timeline. So I'm not going to have time to cover every single one of these. It's really a case of you guys having a play with it and seeing what kind of effects that you like. But just to quickly demonstrate, I'm just going to choose something from this animate in, maybe this fade up and flip. So I'm going to select that. I'm just going to drag it all the way over to my layer in my timeline and drop that on top. Now we'll just hit spacebar on the keyboard to play and see what it looks like. So that's not too bad as a quick animation. You could find something better than this if you wanted to. If we just go ahead and Command Z or Control Z to undo that effect, and we just try something else quickly, maybe this random fade up, and just see how that one looks, and go ahead and play that one back. So that doesn't look bad at all, and you can see how quick and easy it is just to add presets. And of course you can animate on top of this even though it already has a preset. So for instance, if we bring this back to the start and we just open up our little drop down menu and we go to the transform section, if we go ahead and mark our position keyframe and we just move this off the screen. So I'm just going to drag this up and hold down shift at the same time to keep that perfectly straight. And then I'm going to move this just a couple of keyframes forward. And I'm going to bring this back down again just by dragging that and holding shift and bring this down roughly to around the bottom. And if we play this back now, we're now going to have this moving as well as animating at the same time. And that doesn't look too bad. It did happen pretty quick with coming down from the top because of how close we have our keyframes right here on our position. If you do want to slow that down, then just simply move these across to maybe that 10 frames. And then we'll play that back and see how that looks. So that's not too bad. But as you can see, you can animate on top of this. And also remember what we said earlier about smoothing out our keyframes. So here at the beginning, we want to make sure that this is going to easy ease out. And then over here on the end, we want to easy ease in as that is going into the keyframe. So we go ahead and change that one. And that's going to look a lot smoother when we go ahead and just play that back. Just like that. And with this being a text file inside of After Effects, we can always come back and edit this at any point just by double tapping on that. And we can go ahead and change the text if you wanted to. Alternatively, we can also come and change the font as well as the size. And none of these properties are going to affect the animation itself. So at the moment, we've got 753 pixels for the text. If I just put this down to maybe 600, it's going to be a little bit smaller, but the animation will be the same as what we've already created. So we'll play that back and you see there's no change in the animation. So there is a quick overview of how we would use text inside of After Effects. And now we're going to move on to creating some shapes. So before I do that, I'm just going to close down this menu here inside of my layer so it doesn't distract us. Then before we go ahead and add any shapes to our project file, there's just one important step that we need to check. And that is going to be down here inside of our timeline on our layers. At the moment, you can see that our Your Text layer is highlighted as that is going to be in a lighter gray than the background. So what we need to do first is deselect this layer, and you can do that by tapping anywhere inside of the darker area. And the reason this is important is because if we start to draw a shape on top of this layer while it's highlighted, that is going to act as a mask, just like it did when we come to cut out our logo. So I'll just quickly demonstrate that once again. With the layer selected, if we go up to our top tool menu bar up on the top left hand side and we select our rectangle, if I now start to draw over this, it's all going to disappear as you can see. And as I start drawing over the text, it's going to start to bring it back. So with us wanting to draw a shape, this is obviously not what we want to do. We don't want to create a mask. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Command or Control Z just to undo that and go ahead and close this. So like I said, just make sure that you do not have your layer selected and just deselect that. Then you are free to go back up to your top toolbar menu and either grab our rectangle tool right there, or we can use a pen tool, which is a way of creating custom shapes. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But if you hover over your rectangle tool just here, you can see that we've got some additional shapes that we can work with inside of there. But first of all, we're just going to talk about the pen tool and how we can create a custom shape. So if we go ahead and select that, all we need to do is come over to our composition window and just create a start point anywhere inside of our canvas. So if I just tap on my mouse anywhere there, that is going to be our start point, and we can just start drawing any kind of shape that you like. And all you got to do to close the shape is go ahead and join the finish point, which is right there, to the start point. And as you can see, it's started to fill in with a color as we start drawing around it. But right now, this is still an open path as we haven't joined the end point and the start point. So to do that, just simply select that start point, and then that is going to join that all together as one shape. And now you can see, because we wasn't on this highlighted layer originally, it now has our own individual layer for that shape. And it is a shape layer and not a mask. However, if you wanted to add some additional shapes on top of your shape layer, then this is going to work a little bit differently. Because it is a shape layer, it will create them as shapes rather than a mask. So just to quickly demonstrate that, I'm going to go back up and select my pen tool once again. And another thing I want to mention with a pen tool, if you want to create curves, the way you're going to do that is just create your first point, then come down to where you want to create your next one. And once you click down on your mouse, do not let go of your mouse. So you just hold it into place like that. And then you just got to start to pull away. And then you can see it starts to bend or curve in the direction that you want. And this is just a case of going up or down, left or right to get that position. And then just let go once you're happy. And it's just the same principle on your next point. Just click and don't let go. And then we can just start to change that however you like. So I imagine if you've had any experience using Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Photoshop, or Affinity Photo or Affinity Designer, you're going to have a pretty good idea how to use a pen tool. This can be one of them overwhelming tools that can take you a while to get your head around how it works. And usually it will take an entire video just to teach you the basics. However, that's not something I'm going to cover in this video, as it's going to take up far too much of your time. But I imagine you can find hundreds of thousands of videos based on the pen tool in the Adobe products if you just search on YouTube. If for any reason you want me to teach you this myself, let me know in the comments and I'll make a dedicated video for the pen tool. So now moving on, as you can see, because we are on this shape layer, no matter how many different shapes we make, it'll just keep creating shapes rather than a mask. And the way this is going to work if you want to turn these into a mask rather than a shape is with this little button that we've got up here on the top left hand side. We've got this star right there and that says Tool Create Shape. Then over to the right of that, we've got Tool Creates Mask. And all we got to do is just switch between these two depending on what it is that you want to do. So if I just decide now that I want to cut out a circle inside of this rectangle, I'm just going to go back up to the section where we've got the shape or the mask options. I'm going to choose that mask. I'm going to go and change my rectangle to be an ellipse. And then I'm just going to draw this inside of the rectangle and hold down Shift to lock those proportions. But one thing to keep in mind is because of all these shapes are on one individual layer, once I go and mask a circle, everything else will disappear. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to start to draw this. So we can see now that what this essentially has done is just cut out this circle from the rectangle and it's made everything else disappear on the canvas because it's all linked to that one layer. So if you want to avoid any of this happening in your projects, then just make sure that all your shapes are on individual layers rather than just one if you plan to use masks. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and undo that with Command or Control Z. And we can move on to talking about animating the shapes. But before doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this shape layer and create a brand new one. So I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard. And what we need to remember is not to highlight the text layer, or we're going to have the same issue that we had with creating a mask. So with that deselected, we're just going to go back up to the top menu bar and select a different shape. And I think I'm going to go for a polygon. And I'm just going to hold down Shift just to draw this out. And go ahead and grab my selection tool on the top menu bar and just move that into position. So just like anything else that we've animated so far, we can just go ahead and open up the transform menu and just do all the same things that we've already learned. Or alternatively, we can go back up to the right hand side once again and select our effects and presets. And it's just a case of going through all of these and finding something that you like. But as a starting point, if we just open up animation presets and we find shapes right there, there's going to be a few options that we have inside of here that we can use. But just as a quick note, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the shapes folder. There are going to be a number of different animations inside of here that are going to affect the shape in different ways. So it really is a case of you guys just having a little play around with it. As like I said, I can't cover every one of these in the video. But just as a quick demonstration, I'm just going to grab the first thing I can find, such as that alien face right there. I'm just going to drag that on top of our shape just to see how it affects it. And as this is a little bit small at the moment, I'm just going to scale this up in our menu just to make that a bit bigger so you guys can see it. I'm going to go ahead and play this back so we can see how it's animated. So that doesn't look amazing, but you can get a general idea of how it does work. And another thing you may notice when creating shapes, if you want to change the colors or the strokes, we can do that just in this top menu bar up here where we've got the fill color, which is green at the moment, and we've got the stroke, which is white. You can turn that off just by adjusting that 4 to be 0 and go ahead and change the color if you like to something different. So as a brief overview, that's all I'm going to cover now with shapes, but there is so much more that you can do in terms of animation. But with this being a beginner course, I want to focus on just getting you started rather than being more complex. However, before we move on, there's just something else that I want to quickly address, and that is going to be our anchor point that you can see right here in the center of our shape. It's just this little round circle with a crosshair in the middle, and this is going to be important because it can really affect the way you are animating your objects. As sometimes when you create text or shapes, it may not necessarily be in the middle and could be anywhere within inside of the boundary box itself. And a quick demonstration of what I mean by this is because at the moment it's in the middle of this. If I come down to the rotation settings and I start to rotate this, it's going to rotate from the middle. So you can see it's starting to spin round from the middle, which is probably what you'd want it to do. So if I go ahead and hit Command or Control Z just to undo that, and I'm going to go ahead now and move this anchor point. And in order to do that, we're going to come up to our top toolbar menu and we're going to select this little icon right there, which is a box with these little triangles in the middle. And then we're going to come down and just move this into a different position. So for instance, I'm just going to move it to this top left-hand corner. So sometimes this is where you may find by default, it could be on some shapes or text. And it's why it's important to remember to move it to where you need it. So now when we come down to the rotation and we start to rotate again, it's now going to rotate from this axis rather than in the middle. So once again, I'm just going to hit that rotation now. So now you can see it's starting to rotate in a different way than what we originally had. And that may not be what you are necessarily going for. So that is going to be the same thing if we go and try and scale this. It's going to scale from this position right there rather than in the center. So if we just quickly change this now, you can see it's starting to pull itself into the left-hand side. And once again, that may not be the way you want to scale. You may want it to scale from 0 in the middle till it gets big enough to fill the screen. So just keep in mind, if things aren't animating the way that they should be, then just go ahead and always check your anchor point to make sure that is positioned correctly. And with that said, we can go ahead and just delete this shape layer now so we can move on. And what I want to talk about next is creating a solid. And what a solid can be used for is generally changing the background color of your document, as well as creating things such as frames or custom shapes using masks and various other options. So the way we're going to go ahead and add a solid into our project is come all the way up to the top where it says layer, go down to new, and we're going to choose solid. So once we do that, it's going to come up with this little pop-up window. And inside of here, we can give this a name. I'm just going to keep that as yellow solid for the moment. Then underneath that, we have the width and the height. At the moment, this is the full dimensions of my canvas, which is 4K. So essentially, it's going to fill the entire screen. This is why it's going to be useful if you just want to change the background color of your project. Or alternatively, you can go ahead and just manually change these numbers to make it smaller. You also have your units if you want to change that from pixels to be something else, as well as your aspect ratio. And of course, down here, we can assign a color to this solid. So I think I'll just leave that as yellow while I demonstrate this. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit that OK button, and then it will fill our entire screen, as you can see. So in a way, all this really is a ginormous rectangle, but it isn't a shape layer. It's just going to be a normal layer. So if we go ahead and draw a shape on this now, it's going to act as a masker like it did on the text. But this is where, for instance, if you want to make a custom frame around your project, you could do that. We could go ahead and just select ourselves a shape up here, maybe this rounded rectangle. And then once we start to draw over this, it's going to create a mask. And then we could just basically imagine we've got an edge around this. So just imagine that as you draw. So we're going to go from that side down here. And at the moment, what this has done is it's filled the inside of the mask, which isn't what we wanted. What we actually want to do is have this black border that we now have around the outside of the shape to be yellow, and for this yellow shape to be invisible on the inside. So what we need to do is just invert this, and we'll do that by right clicking on our mouse, go down to mask and go down to where it says inverted. Then once you select this option, it's now going to flip the mask around on the outside of the shape rather than the inside, just like that. So now we can see we've created ourselves a border. And one thing I want to quickly note is that even though this is solid black inside of our shape right here, in reality, it's actually transparent. It's only black because we assigned that color to work with it. If you want to put this back to being transparent and work with transparency, then just come down to this little menu down here inside of our composition, and we've got this little box with these little check boxes inside, kind of like a chessboard, and just go ahead and select that, and now you can see that black disappears and the background is transparent. However, I always find it best to work with a solid color in the background just to make your design a little bit easier to see on your eyes. So I'll go ahead and re-enable that. So like I said, this is generally just a quick way of making a frame, and that may be one of the reasons you want to use a solid and a mask, amongst other things that you can also do using solids. But once again, that is definitely its own topic for its own video. But I just want to give you a quick introduction into using solids and what they could be used for. So what we're going to do this time around is we're going to go back to our project files, and we're now going to import some movie files or video files that we can work with. So once again, inside of our project window, if we just double tap anywhere inside of this dark gray area, that is going to direct us to a hard drive where we can find some clips. And I'm just going to bring in this one right here, which is just some free stock footage that I found on pixels.com. I'm just going to go ahead and open that. And now that is loaded inside of my project files. And what we're going to do next is just create a new composition with this. So another way we can create a composition is by simply dragging this file on top of our little box down here. So if we just drag this down now and let go of that on top of it, that'll create one for us. And the benefit of doing it this way is it's going to copy all the dimensions that are inside of this video automatically. So there is nothing to set up in terms of getting the right frame size, etc. So with this loaded into our timeline, if I go ahead and just press play, we can see it's just a guy riding his bike through the forest. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to track some text to the bike. So what's going to happen is while he's moving towards us, the text is going to follow his movements. And although this can get really complex, I just want to break it down to be as simple as possible to get you started. Although it is going to be another one of those topics that require its own video. But hopefully I can give you a good understanding how this is going to work. But to get started, the first thing we have to do is head over to the right hand side and close our effects and presets menu. Then we are going to open the tracker menu. At the moment, all of this is grayed out because we haven't selected our clip down here in our timeline. So if we go ahead and just highlight that, we can now see that we have all of these buttons available. And the one we're going to focus on inside of this tutorial is going to be the track motion, as I feel this is probably the one you're going to use the most often, so I'd rather cover this as a starting point. However, I definitely urge you guys to go onto YouTube and just watch some other videos on After Effects tracking so you can get an idea of what the rest of these do, as you can get some really good effects. But moving on, we're going to go ahead and select this track motion button. So after we selected that, you can now see we have this little box in the center of our screen. I'm just going to zoom in on this so you can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to come down to the bottom left hand corner of my composition window, and I'm going to zoom into around 200%. And hopefully you guys can see this now, maybe a little bit bigger so you can see it. So what we've got here now is these two little boxes, and the inside box is going to be our tracking area, and the outside box is going to be our search area. So what I mean by this is what's inside of this little box here is going to try and follow a certain area of the video as it moves along. And if for any reason it goes outside of that box, then this outer box is going to search for it and then try and place it back in the middle. This is definitely not a great explanation. And like I said, you will need its own individual video, but I really want to just give you the basics of the tool. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so I can move this where I want to put it. I'm just going to put my mouse inside of this box in the middle, and I'm going to drag this to put this into place. So the area I'm going to try and focus on with that little X in the middle of that box is going to be this yellow sticker right there on the bike. So with this on the tracking area that I want to use it on, every time this is moving around, hopefully this box is going to stay locked to that sticker. And all we've got to do now is just go back over to the right hand side in our tracker menu. And we've got a few different options in here. We can generally leave all this the way it is right now. You just want to make sure that you are on position right there, as rotation and scale are going to be used on a different type of video. So what we're going to do now is come down towards the bottom where it says analyze, and you'll see we've got these 4 different buttons, and all these are used for is to either analyze by 1 frame going backwards or forward, or analyze either backwards or forwards. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we continue, I actually want to go ahead and trim this clip in half, as it's currently 10 seconds long, and I feel that's a little bit too long for what I'm trying to show you. So in order to trim this, we're going to head over to the right hand side, and you can see we've got this little blue area right there, which says work area end. If we drag that with our mouse across now to the point we want this to cut in half, so around 5 seconds, and just let go there. Then we're going to come up to the top menu bar to our composition, and we're going to go down to where it says trim comp to work area. And then that is going to cut our clip in half now to 5 seconds. So with that done, what we need to do now is just analyze this forward. So it's just simply pushing this button right here. So once you go ahead and do that, it's going to automatically start tracking this as it moves along in the video. So now it's analyzed the clip and it's complete. I've just brought my playhead back to the beginning of the video. And you can see that we have this path now where it tracks a sticker throughout the entire clip. And you can see if I just start to scrub across, it follows that path. So that is generally how that is going to work. But at the moment, this does not do absolutely anything at all. So in order for us to have an object that's going to follow this path, we have to go ahead and create something that is called a null object. And to do that, we're going to go up to the top menu bar to where it says layer. We're going to go down to new, and we're going to go down to where it says null object, and we're going to go ahead and select that one. And now this is available down here inside of our timeline. So a null object is essentially absolutely nothing at all. It's just an invisible box that we're not going to see while the video plays. But what we can do with that invisible box is apply properties to it. And the way this is going to work is we're now going to come back over to the right hand side to where we got our tracker menu. And we're going to go down to where it says edit target. Once you select on there, you can see inside of here next to the layer section, it says null one. And this is going to be dependent on how many of these you've got inside of here. We only have one at the moment, so we'll select that null one. But if you are using multiple null objects, then go ahead and select the one that you want to use. So once you've selected that one, just go ahead and hit OK. And now what we need to do from here is just come back over to the right hand side and just go ahead and hit that apply button. And then it will ask you to apply dimensions to X and Y, which is going to be correct. So go ahead and hit OK. And now you can see all of these little red keyframes that we've got inside of here, which is going to be our path. So if we go ahead now and come back down to our layers and we open up the null object, you can now see inside of the transform in our position area, you can see we now have all of these individual keyframes that were created for us. And these are just copying the X and Y position of the bike as it moves along. So we can go ahead and close that now. So if we go ahead and play this back, we still can't see it's doing absolutely anything at all. As I said, the null object is an invisible box, so we just cannot see that. But what we actually need to do is go ahead and create our text file. So if we just make our way up to the top menu bar once again and we select our text tool, we can just go ahead and type in anything you like. I'm just going to put in bike ride. And then I'm going to select all of this so I can change the size. It's far too big at the moment. So I'm just going to drag that down in size somewhere around there. That stroke is far too big. So I want to change that as well. Maybe to around 3 pixels. And that will do perfectly well just to demonstrate. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my selection tool so I can move this around. Then what we've got to do at this point is just position this to wherever you want it to go. So I'm just going to bring it roughly down here alongside the bike and then just let go of that. And then we need to link this new text file to that null object. And the way that we are going to do that is with this pick wick button that we've got right here. We're going to simply select that while holding down on our mouse. And we're just going to drag that over on top of the null object. And that is all there is to it in terms of applying the text file to the null object. So if we press spacebar on our keyboard now, you're going to see this follow the bike as it moves along in the video. And it really is just as simple as that. You can see it was a 5-minute job to get a really good effect. And this is the exact process for when creating effects, such as maybe having fire in someone's hand. You'll just track that hand as it moves and make the fire move with it. So if I just quickly demonstrate that, we'll just maybe put a flame on top of his head and we'll just have that following throughout the entire video. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the bike ride text and the null object for a moment and bring this back to the beginning. So just like before, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into our tracking menu, select our clip first. Then we're going to go on to track motion. Once again, we are going to move it over the helmet. So I'm going to hold down spacebar on my keyboard while I drag this up into position. Then we'll just go ahead and drag our little box. And I'm going to track a part of his helmet, which is going to be quite easy to follow. So maybe that black part right there. And then once again, we'll go over to analyze and we'll just analyze forward and let it complete the clip for us. So with that complete and me bringing the playhead back to the beginning, I'm just going to zoom out once again so I can see the entire clip. But you can see right here that we now have a brand new path, which is going to follow our helmet. So we just got to do the exact same process as before. We've got to create a null object. So go back up to the layer menu at the top menu bar, go down to new and choose that null object. Then we're going to go back over to the right hand side to our tracker menu. We're going to edit that target once again. This now is called null free and just make sure you got that one assigned. Hit that OK button. Then we're going to go ahead and hit that apply. And once again, confirm that X and Y position. And we now have all of our keyframes assigned just like we did before. And all we got to do now is bring a flame into our project that's going to follow our biker through the forest. So first things first, in order to find the flame, we're going to go over to our library section on the right hand side. And at the moment, I am inside of the Adobe stock footage. And you can search for all different types of clips in here. However, I don't always recommend doing this as some of these are really expensive and you have to pay for them. And there are free resources online if you go ahead and just search for those. All it essentially is a video with a black background. What we're going to do is remove the black background, so all that's left is going to be the fire. So if we go ahead now and just drag this into our project and just let that go. And as you can see, because we haven't paid for it, it says Adobe stock right there in the middle. That will disappear if you choose to buy the clip. But for now, we can go ahead and just animate this to see how it looks. So I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller in size. And it's not going to be perfect. It's just going to be an example. I'm now just going to move this over his head into place. And what we need to do now is just remove this black background. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to come back down to our timeline where our layers are. And at the bottom here, it says toggle switches / modes. If we hit that button right there, we now have a new option here that says mode, and inside of here we can change the blend mode. And in order to remove a black background, we need to go into the add section. So this entire section here from the add to the lighter color is going to be to remove darker areas such as black. And above that is where we're going to remove white backgrounds from the darken to the darker color. And where you find overlay and hard mix is generally your 50% gray. But for now, we're just going to focus on removing the black background. So if we just select that add option right there, we can now see that the flame is still visible, but the black background is gone. So I'll zoom back in here so you can see this properly, around 400%. I'm going to hold down my space bar so I can move up the screen and zoom out just a little bit because it's a bit too big. So I'm going to take that back to 200. Hopefully you guys can see this. And I'm just going to go ahead and resize this fire a little bit just to fit on top of his head and just bring that down into position and just try and match that helmet. So somewhere around there will be fine. So I'm going to zoom back out at this point, back to that 200%. And just like before, all we got to do now is just apply this clip to that null object. And we're going to do that with a pick whip. Once again, just select that and just drag that over on top of the null object. So if we go ahead and hit that space bar again, it's now going to follow it just like that. And this is how you would apply special effects to video footage. It's just a case of trying to track something in your video that you want to apply the effect to, creating that motion path with a tracker, and then just simply applying that effect to the null object. So I know this wasn't the greatest explanation. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I did want to give you just a brief introduction to tracking and why it is important and some of the really good effects that you can get with this. So before I go ahead and wrap this tutorial up, as I now feel you've learned enough of the basics to get you started on your very own project, I just want to show you how you would export anything that you may work on. And to do that, I'm going to go back to the original logo that we created just down here in our timeline window and select the MJW Media Studios. And another thing I want to quickly go over, as I forgot to mention it, is layer styles. So if I go back inside of my composition for the logo, and we have all of our original files for our logo that we created, if we want to apply an effect to any of these layers, such as a drop shadow or an outer glow or various other effects, the way that we would do that is by applying a layer style. And the way you do that is coming back over to the left hand side of the timeline, find any layer that you want to apply a style to. If I choose the MJW, for instance, if I right click on my mouse, then I choose layer styles, you can see we have all these different options inside of here that we can use. So as a demonstration, I'm just going to choose that drop shadow. And at the moment, we can't see the drop shadow because of the black background. But if you want to go ahead and change that, you can do that in two ways. First way being, we can just go ahead and toggle the transparency like I showed you before. Just go ahead and turn that off. And now we can see there is that black background or the shadow there behind the text. Or the other way is just to simply put that back on and go back over to our project window, select our project setting, go into our composition and right click on there, composition settings, then go ahead and change that background color down there from black to something a little bit lighter, maybe somewhere in this blue section, hit OK. And then now we can see that shadow once again. And to adjust any of these shadow properties, we just got to come back down into our layer section over in our timeline. And we just got to open up the drop shadow menu. And all your options are inside of here in terms of changing your distance or your size. So it's just a case of dragging this across, also changing the size and just having a little play around with all these effects. And one thing to remember, every single time you see a stopwatch on any of these functions, that means you can animate them. So if you want this shadow to get bigger over time, then you just animate that with keyframes like I've already showed you. And that is a quick introduction to creating layer styles. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that for a moment and go back to where we started and just close that down. And another thing I didn't really get to talk about was the parent and link. And this is because we didn't really need to use it inside of this tutorial. But these are a way of assigning one layer to another. So in a way, it's kind of grouping maybe the MJW to the media. So if we move one of these, the other one will move with it. This is a really useful tool if you are creating animation rigs where maybe you have a character where the arms and the hands and the shoulders and the head and all them pieces are individual. That is where you would piece these all together using the parent and link, and then you'd animate them all separately. But that will be a topic for another video. So with all of that said and done, let's go ahead and export our project. the first thing we need to do before we export it is make sure that we choose the right composition that we want to save. So right now we are inside of the logo composition and we want to save this as the entire animation. So we're going to go back to the original file, which is the MJW Media Studios. Then once you've selected your composition that you want to export, go up to the top menu bar to where it says composition. And down here, we've got two different options. We've got add to Adobe Media Encoder queue and we've got add to render queue. So as a starting point, as a beginner, I just recommend you just stick to add to render queue as it can get a bit more complicated with a media encoder. So for now, we'll just go to the add to render queue. And now you can see down here inside of our timeline, all of our options have now changed. So to be very quick and efficient without overcomplicating things, if you just want to get your project exported with the highest possible quality, then you're just going to go ahead and leave these as they are. You're just going to leave it as best settings and lossless. However, if you do want to get custom with this, all you got to do is just double tap on here and you can start changing things inside of there. So one thing I need to mention, if you want to export this logo without the background, so it's going to be transparent, what you need to do here is go in and change your video output. If you focus on the channels where it says RGB, we've got to go ahead and change that to where it says RGB plus alpha. That way, when you come to export it, it's going to know to remove that black background. So when you overlay that on another video, you're not going to see the black background. If you do want the black background, then just go ahead and leave it as RGB. And that is all there is to it. But for the most part, you may just want to keep both of these settings exactly as they are. If you feel the files are too big in size, and like I said, just go in and adjust them. But there are a lot of different settings inside of these, so I would recommend watching another YouTube video. So over to the right hand side, we've got the output to, and this is just where you're going to specify on your hard drive where you'd like it to be saved to. And that is generally all there is to it. Once you've selected your settings and you've chose your output, all you'll have to do is come over to the far right hand side to where it says render, select that button and it'll start rendering out your clip. So I hope you found today's tutorial useful. If you did, then please give me a thumbs up as it really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm and helps other people find my content. And if you know anybody that may benefit from this video, then please go ahead and share that for me. And of course, if you haven't already, then please hit that subscribe button and check out any of the other videos I've already created in some of the other professional software, as well as any future releases I have coming. But for now, I hope you have a great day and I will see you in the next video.